Hi guys, it's Ben here from TX Space Station. How's everyone doing? And welcome to this play and chat. It's been a little while since I did one of these. I'm playing Spelunky on the PS4, which is a game I've been enjoying quite a bit of recently. It's quite an old game, so I'm sure most of you guys are aware of it. It's basically kind of a cute, cartoony platformer, but the thing that I like about it is the fact that it's got roguelike elements, so it's randomly generated, and it's permadeath, and it's very difficult. So yeah, if you fluff it up, you've only got 4 hit points to start with. If you fluff it up, you basically die and have to start all over again. And I love the fact that there's a very diverse roster of characters, including a very ethnically diverse roster of characters, which is always important. I always find it very weird when all of the heroes are white men. So here I'm playing as an Indian guy, presumably a Sikh guy because I've got a turban on, which is just very cool. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about in this play and chat, and the first one is going to be a video response. This was a video by SegaOfMyHouse, I believe, and it was also a VR was done by Vampire Mike, and I've immediately fallen on a set of spikes. That was brilliant, wasn't it? And basically the question is, what great video game did you not enjoy? You know, it's kind of looking at games that were really popular, that many people swear by, oh, we can jump down, that for whatever reason you didn't get along with. And I always like this kind of question because it kind of, oh god, I'm sucking at this. It kind of emphasizes the point that, you know, no game is going to be everyone's cup of tea. There are games that some people will just not get along with for whatever reason, and it all comes down to personal preference, I guess, which is the name of the game, isn't it? And for me, oh, let's go and try and rescue that damsel in distress. For me, the series that I always wanted to like but could never get into was the Resident Evil games. And this is an absolutely killer, just throwing the woman at the skeleton there. This is an absolutely killer franchise that is super, super popular, that I just can't get into. And I guess one of the things is that I've never really been particularly into horror games. I kind of find horror as a film genre and as a game genre really cheesy and a bit unbelievable, and it's just not my cup of tea, to be honest. So maybe that's part of it, but I remember when that game first came out, I watched my cousin playing it and thought, this is awesome. You know that first scene in the first game when the zombie turns around and you see his bloodied face and everything, and you think, oh my god, what's going on here? But then when I actually tried to play the games myself, I just couldn't get it. And I think the main reason why I can't get it is because they're the least ergonomic video games I've ever played. To me, the first thing someone should think of when they're making a game is, how does this actually feel to play? You know, not does it look cool and all that other stuff, but how does it actually feel to play? And when it comes down to some of those Capcom horror games, Resident Evil being one, or if you look at something like Silent Hill, was that Capcom? Not sure. Similar type of game though. The controls are just bloody awful. I don't know what to do here. I've blocked the exit with that. Oh shit, I'm going to end up blowing her up. No, she survived. She's made of strong stuff. I think she survived. No, she's dead. The controls are just absolutely horrendous. It's, you know, you guys will know if you've played these games, they handle as though you're controlling a tank. It's like driving a tank through treacle. Like, no human moves like that, but for some reason they thought that was an acceptable way to make the games. And I guess the games aren't scary in and of themselves, they're literally only scary because they are bloody impossible to control. Which to me, well, you know, the fear should come from what's actually happening in the game, not from the fact that it's almost impossible to walk backwards down a corridor. You know, nobody turns like a tank, and all of the immersion of the game just got lost on me because of that. But it's not only that, there's a really large number of mechanics in the game that to me just seem really badly thought out. All the micromanagement of your inventory and fiddling around with save ribbons and all that stuff. It's like, god, just let me play the actual bloody game and we'll worry about all of the mechanic stuff later. I'm the kind of person that gets, oh, bloody hell, gets quickly annoyed by annoying mechanics. And so it just took away the immersion for me and meant that I just couldn't get round to enjoying the actual content, even though I can see that they're pretty innovative games that did something really awesome and were kind of, you know, the first really mainstream survival horror games in proper 3D. So it's funny, it's like I can see that they're great games, but I also can't see myself ever being able to bear them enough to play them because of those treacly tank controls and all of the faffing about with the inventory. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. I mean, it's similar, I like Silent Hill in some ways. When that first came out, I was like, oh cool, this is a really scary game. But I just can't play it. I can't play it because of that. Maybe part of it is that I'm a bit of a wuss and I find these games scary. Like, I'm too intimidated to actually try and navigate these games while moving so slowly. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting question though, and I'm sure we all have games that people loved that we couldn't get along with for whatever reason. So yeah, I'll post a link to the original video and to Vampire Mike's response in the comment section below, and I'd be interested to hear what your games were that you couldn't get along with. The other thing I wanted to talk about today was the whole EA thing that's been going on. Now, unless you've had your head under a rock, you'll be aware that there's been a reasonable amount of controversy coming out recently, sort of surrounding EA's most recent major multiplayer game, which is Battlefront 2. Now, I actually have played Battlefront 1, Star Wars Battlefront 1, quite a bit, because I guess in anticipation of the fact that the second one was coming out, should I risk trying to steal this? This is always going to end badly. Oh, there we go, got away. In anticipation of the second one coming out, they discounted it really, really well on the PlayStation Store, and I got it for like £5 or less or something really, really good, and it came with all the DLC and stuff. So I was like, well, of course I'll try it and see what it plays like, and it was a reasonable game. But even playing that, there were hints of the problems to come, because when you first start out in that game, it's incredibly difficult, and yeah, a part of that is because of you're a noob and your skill level isn't there when you first begin. But a big part of it is the fact that you just don't have access to the same weapons and power-ups as everybody else. So everyone's destroying you with really, really high power weapons, and you can't access the same level of stuff. And so you basically have to spend quite a few hours of gameplay getting your ass completely handed to you. And I've realised that's part of the model, because that model breeds frustration. And when you're frustrated, if somebody introduces a mechanic like, well, you could just skip all of this struggling around and I knew he was going to get me, and just pay for upgrades. Oh god, I got killed again. Just pay for upgrades, and then you won't have to go through all of this. And it's about creating a false problem that shouldn't have been there to begin with, which is that there's a massively uneven playing field to begin the games, and basically move from there to make people pay for stuff. So some of the best shooter video games, first-person shooters, multiplayer shooters of all time just didn't have that. They were ones that were based purely on skill and not on variety. Variety which is down to what people can or can't access. If I think about some of the awesome games that I used to love back in the day, like Quake, that was simply about level of skill, and it wasn't really about tiers of weapons. And actually the version that most people that I knew liked the most was Instagib, which was a railgun only version. So oh god damn it, I am sucking at this. So the playing field was completely even in that sense, because everybody had the same weapon, and the point was it was just down to your skill, and that was really fun. That's much more fun than getting your ass handed to you, not because you're bad, but because other people have got better weapons than you, which is a very unpleasant environment to learn in. Very, very hard to get better, because it's just not a level playing field to begin with. So that's very frustrating to start off with. Now, I think that this idea of paying for little bits to speed up games really comes from the mobile app world, because there are lots of games on there, even games that my mum plays and stuff, like Candy Crush and stuff, or these duel games where you kind of can play a certain amount each day, but it's limited, and if you want to play more, you either have to wait until a certain amount of hours pass, or you pay to play a bit more, but the actual games themselves are free. So it's this kind of business model of the game's completely free to access on some minimal level, but if you want to speed things up and get past annoying things, you've got to shell out cash. Now, that makes a degree of sense. That's one model that you could base a business on, but it becomes very, very, well, basically it becomes a farce when you're actually talking about games that people have paid for, because of course Star Wars Battlefront 2 actually goes for oh shit, I keep forgetting those bloody spike traps, goes for a full retail price, and then on top of that there's all of this kind of paying for multiple iterations of the game, different upgrades, different packs and things, and then the dreaded and much controversial and much debated loot box system, which is now creeping in, which I can understand the angle it's going from, in the sense that it's trying to recreate that sheer thrill that you used to get when you collected Pokemon cards or football stickers, where you open the pack and you never quite know what's going to be inside. That's a mechanic and a feeling that works very well, and that most school kids can relate to. But it's not really a mechanic that's welcome in video games, and not one. It kind of encourages a degree of gambling, which I think is one of the big criticisms of it. It's kind of like, well, you didn't get what you wanted that time, but you could just pay for another pack. And, you know, it's all very, very easy to spend money on these things. So these, oh god, I was lucky there. These systems are set up just to I am sucking at this game. It's pretty rotter, isn't it? Systems are set up to make it very easy to spend lots of cash, and basically to make you spend, fuck's sake, more and more and more on a game. And what a game is becoming debatable, and that definition is changing, you know. It used to be that you purchased, oh, what the hell is that? You purchased a game, you had the game, and that was that, basically. Oh cool, I've got a cape. And all the things that it would involve were there for you to have at the beginning. Level playing field. And that's one of the things I've been thinking recently, is this is why, to me, retro games are still so appealing, because there's none of that DLC stuff. There's none of that a gimped game gets released that then needs a day one upgrade, and there's none of these horrible sneaky business models. The game had to be good, and it had to be worth the money you were spending on it, because that was it. And you know, I just feel like these business practices are shambolic, and they're unethical, they're exploitative, and people are wanting to have their cake and eat it, and it ain't fair, it ain't decent, and it's certainly not going to be stood for. Now, the great thing about all of this is the fact that I think it's highlighted the fact that the YouTube and the gaming community has a degree of power, more so than ever in the past, I think. What with Metacritic and with big prolific online YouTube channels having a degree of sway, and the way that the internet is, opinions can be spread very quickly nowadays, and I think that is really good, because actually you'll see that the Battlefront team rescinded the loot box stuff based on the back of all this controversy, because the power actually lies with us. If we decide not to buy the game, if we decide to say negative things on online reviews or whatever, if we do that stuff, then people panic and they worry they're going to lose money, and I think that sends a fantastic message. The message is that, you know, don't piss around with us, because we have the power here. And so it's important that YouTubers and video game reviewers and websites have their say and don't tolerate this kind of junk, because it ain't on, basically. We want our video games to be complete packages. You know, I don't mind the idea of, like, you know, releasing some DLC ages and ages later that kind of expands the game. Yeah, that's okay, but there's a line, you know, a very important line, and it ain't okay to get away with this. I think that EA as a company are becoming very, very controversial, less and less popular. Their business practices are just horrendous, and you only need to do a quick Google search to see how many companies EA have screwed up and ended up closing down and stuff, to realise that they're bad for the gaming industry, and they're bad, they're bad for us. So yeah, I want to know what you guys think about all this stuff. Do you think loot boxes are basically glorified gambling? Because I think that there are discussions now being had in relatively high up places about whether these practices are actually unethical. Is it any different from going down to the bookies? Are people with addictive personalities going to end up coming a cropper from this stuff? It's possible, and I don't think these business practices from the mobile gaming world should be coming in and influencing our AAA titles. So there we have it, that's my 2 pence. I'm sucking at Spelunky, sorry I barely got anywhere in it. Repeatedly died over and over again. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on these issues, guys. Take care and I'll speak to you all soon, bye.